In an earlier video, we went over how to add a test bank to your Blackboard course. Within your test canvas, you can access test banks and sort or filter them to locate questions you choose to use on your test. Additionally, you can use the test banks and pools to create subsets of questions, which will randomly be given to your students within your test. By using the sorting and filtering options, you can control and organize which sets are created for your test. There are three options when using test banks: find questions, question set, or random block. Find questions is when you sort, filter, and search to pick individual questions that you want to be added to the test canvas. A question set is when you sort, filter, and search to pick a small group, a subset, of questions you want to be added to the test canvas. You will then determine how many of these each student will get at random. Finally, a random block is when you pick a large group of questions you want to be added to the test canvas. You will then determine how many of these each student will get at random. These can be used multiple times and in combination with each other, in addition to creating questions manually to create your test canvas. To add test banks, let's start at Reuse Question. Hover over this. From here, if you want to navigate through one or multiple test banks and pools to handpick the specific questions you want to have on your test, choose Find Questions. This pops open a window which displays all your test banks, pools, or regular tests that you've already created. Note that if this does not pop up, please make sure that pop-ups are enabled on your browser. From here, select one or multiple tests or pools. As you do so, the questions from these tests and pools will appear on the right side. The more you add, the bigger the source will be for picking the questions you want to use. From here, you can either apply filtering options, or simply scroll through the questions that you've selected from the pools to pick out the ones to add to your test. Let's talk about filtering first. Below the pools and tests on the left side are filtering options. Expand these to pick which ones you want to add to your test. You can filter by question type, category, topic, level of difficulty, or keywords. As you get questions from your provider, they may have already tagged levels of difficulty, topics, categories, or keywords. To begin our filtering, we select our source, where we want our questions to come from. I've selected these four pools, which total 51 questions. Now that I've selected 51 total possible questions, I can filter it down. Let's say I only want the hard level questions. There aren't any hard level questions within those 51 that I've chosen. Let's say I want only questions that are multiple choice. If I click multiple choice, I can see it goes from 51 to 35. Maybe I want multiple choice and essay questions. You'll see it goes from 35 to 39, which means that there are 4 essay questions among the 4 pools that I chose. As you filter and handpick questions, you'll see them added to this little bucket or shopping cart down below. Let's say I want these 2 questions. These are from the first 4 pools I selected, and they're essay questions. So let's say I picked all the questions that I want from those 4 pools, which happen to be 2 essay questions. Let's select a couple of different pools. For example, Chapter 2, 2.1, Chapter 4, 4.2, and Chapter 5, 5.4. There are a total of 84 possible questions in here. From here, I want to filter it down by true-false questions. There are 14 total true-false questions from the 3 pools I selected. If I want to find more about individual questions before I decide to add them to the bucket, I can click Question Display over here. Currently, it's truncated, which means that it's cut off after a certain amount of point to save space. What I can do is click Full Text, and the full text appears. If I want to read the full question before I decide to add it, I can click this little box over here, and it'll give me the full text of the question, as well as the answer, as well as any correct or incorrect feedback. I'm going to choose this one and this one. Now remember, before we had a couple of essay questions that we added. Now we've added 2 true-false questions. They'll continue to be added to the bucket. If we click this little box over here, we can expand the bucket and see which questions that we've queued to be added to our test canvas. We can click this button to see what they look like. If we want to get rid of any of these, we can click the X next to them. Or we could just untick the box. So far, I have 2 questions that I'm going to be adding to my test canvas. Let's look for a couple more. In our pools, I'm going to clear all the pools. And we're going to start with Chapter 1, 1.9, Chapter 2, 2.2, Chapter 2, 2.1, and Chapter 1, 1.7. Among these 4 pools, I have a total of 17 questions that are true-false. Taking away the true-false filter, I see that there are a total of 88 questions in here. From these 4 pools, I want to select all the multiple choice questions. So I'll click multiple choice. I can see that there are 64 multiple choice questions. Now, since there are more than 25 that appear on a page, in order to select all of them, what I'll have to do is go down to this area and click Show All. This will display all 64 possible multiple choice questions from those 4 pools in one area. From here, I can click this, and it will select all 64 and bring them down to the bucket. Once I'm ready, I can click the Submit button, and it will add these questions to our test canvas. All 64 of the questions that we picked have now been added to the bottom of our test canvas. As with manually created questions, you can drag and drop the order in which they'll appear by going to the left side. When your cursor turns into a snowflake, click and move up or down in context. The ordering of the questions will change when you do this. As you add questions, you'll be able to see the full question, as well as the answers, as well as any correct or incorrect feedback that has been given either by yourself as well as the textbook provider when they presented you with these test banks. To remove any questions that you've added, just as how you remove questions that you manually added, click the box next to the questions that you'd like to remove. Then, at the top of the screen or the bottom of the screen, click Delete, and those questions that you've selected will be removed. Note that they will not be removed from your test pool, but merely from this test canvas. You can always go back and add them later. Next, let's talk about question sets. To add a question set, go to Reuse Question and select Create Question Set. As you can see, question sets are very similar to using Find Questions. However, you're creating a subset or mini pool of questions of your choosing from the available banks. Basically, the difference for a question set is, instead of picking the questions you'll be adding to the test that all students must answer, you are picking the questions to populate a subset from which you determine how many of those questions are provided to your students. To produce your question set, you'll follow many of the same steps in Find Questions. Let's say you want to have a 10-question chapter quiz on Chapter 6 of your textbook. So let's find Chapter 6 from your pools. Here's Chapter 6. As you can see, Chapter 6 has 125 total questions. But instead of wanting to use all 125 total questions as your subset, let's say that you want to filter down and find 25 really good questions that you want to use to generate 10 questions for each student randomly, basically creating your question set. To do that, we can apply our filtering by using the filter options. This time, let's use word search filtering. I want to find all the questions that have to do with amortization from Chapter 6. So I type in amortization at the upper left and click Go. There are 7 total questions that have to do with amortization. I'll add them all in my bucket. Now, let's say I also want to find all questions that have the word interest in them. So I type in interest and I search for that. Now notice that I still have amortization here, so it filters down by anything that has amortization and interest. I need to remove a search term if I want to have a new one of just interest. So I'll click X next to amortization, and now I'm only displaying from Chapter 6 anything that has the word interest in them. But look here, there are a couple of questions that have both amortization and interest. This lets me know so I don't pick it doubly. So here's a couple of questions that I want to add to my bucket. Again, I can click over here and I can read the entire question with the answers. Or if I just want the entire text to display, I can go to Question Display and go to Full Text. So far, we have 12 questions. We want to pick 25, of which 10 will be drawn randomly for our students. So let's use another filter, Loan. We can see that there are a couple of more questions that have the word loan in them, and there are a couple of them that we've already picked to add to our bucket. Let's select this one, 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 and this one. Finally, I'm going to search for anything that has the word percent. Again, what I've done over here is I've searched for interest and loan, so these are the only questions in which both interest and loan appear. I'm going to filter by percent, so now I can see all questions that have interest, loan, and percent. I still have 2 questions for my bucket, so I'm going to click this one and this one. Now I have 25 total questions. Of these 25 total questions, I get to pick how many are asked of our students. I click here and I type in 10. So basically, as you can see, there were already 11 questions added to the test. From here, I determine how many more will be added to our test. So right now, we have 21 total questions. The last 10 questions are to be drawn from this 25, which in itself was drawn from the larger pool of 125 from Chapter 6. On the right, this is where I determine the points per question from this subset I created. If I want each question to be worth 1 point, I fill that in, and we see that this subset of 10 questions is going to be worth 10 points. Note that the 10 questions will be randomly drawn from the 25 that I selected. Now, once I've added a question set, I can always modify it by expanding questions in the set over here. I can click to remove any questions that I want to remove from this set by clicking Remove Question. Or I can add any additional questions to the set by clicking Add Questions, which pops this up again and allows us to search, sort, and filter. Finally, let's talk about the random block option. To get a random block, go to Reuse Question and select Create Random Block. Now, random block is similar to a question set in that you do pick a subset, however you have less control over what's included. This allows you to select a pool or multiple pools, filter by question types, but does not let you pinpoint individual questions to choose for a subset or filter by any other options. Rather, the set is expanded to all questions that meet the criteria within the pool or pools selected. For example, if you wanted to have the aforementioned 10-question quiz on Chapter 6, which has 125 total questions in the pool, and asks the student 10 questions, but want to only use multiple choice questions and have all multiple choice questions considered, we can use random block for this. First, let's select the Chapter 6 pool. Once we've selected a pool, we can filter it down by question type. We're going to pick multiple choice here. As you can see, all 125 are added, and there's no ability to select and there's no bucket. This just lets us pick the pool or pools and one or more filtering options to meet criteria. From here, we click the Submit button, and we can see our random block has been added. Again, we're going to select 10 questions to choose from the pool. Now, this is slightly different because it tells us which is our source pool or pools and which question type or types will appear, but doesn't let us individually pick the questions that we want to use for our subset. Again, we can change the points per question by adding the value over here and clicking Submit. On your test, you can combine these methods to produce more specific results. Let's say you have a final exam covering materials from Chapter 11, 12, and 13. For each chapter, you would like students to have one essay question and 4 multiple choice questions chosen at random for a total of 15 questions from these 3 chapters. And then at the very end, you want all students to get the exact same 5 specific questions from Chapter 14. If you want to be able to handpick acceptable questions from your pools to create subsets, let's start with question set. First, we'll go to Chapter 11. From Chapter 11, we'll designate specifically which questions we want to use for the essay question and which questions we want to use for the multiple choice questions. So let's create our subset for the essay questions first. By adding filtering, we can see there are 6 possible essay questions. I'd like our students to be able to get 1 question at random from these 5. So we've added this as our first question set. Our next question set would also be from Chapter 11. This would be the multiple choice questions. So we select multiple choice. We want 5 multiple choice questions. There are 25 total over here. So what we can do is we can filter down which ones that we want based on keywords at the top. Now it filtered it down to 18. So these are all questions on Kant. So I'm going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So out of these 9 questions that I've handpicked, the students will get asked 4 of these. Each student will get 4 random questions from this group of 9. Each student will get 1 random question from this group of 5. And we'll do the same thing for Chapter 12 and 13. Now, if you don't want to handpick questions and use the depth of the pools, then instead of creating a question set, you can create a random block for these questions. We'll go to Reuse Question and create Random Block. From here, let's go to Chapter 12. Now, we don't see anything over here yet because we need to select a filtering option. Remember, we're doing separate ones for essays and multiple choice. So let's click Essay. And here's all the essay questions for 12. We're not able to filter it down any further. However, we can pick how many are asked. 1. We'll do the same thing for our multiple choice questions. Chapter 12, multiple choice. And out of the 25 multiple choice questions, 4 will be asked. One more time, let's do it for Chapter 13. We're going to use the random block method this time because it's a little bit faster. Here's Chapter 13. Here's our essay questions. We can see that there are 6 essay questions. Of our 6 essay questions, we'll be asking one of them. Finally, from Chapter 13, we'll select multiple choice. We can see that there are 25 multiple choice questions from Chapter 13. These will all be considered in a subset, but students will only be asked 4 of them. So far, we have our 15 questions. Now, what to do about that last bit, the 5 questions from Chapter 14? If we want all students to get the same 5 questions, then we go to Reuse Question, and we go to Find Questions. Then we select Chapter 14. From here, we can either handpick or use filtering to determine which questions we want to add as the 5 questions that all students get. Let's search any question that has the word equity in it. And is a multiple choice question. That filtered it down a bit, but there's still a lot of questions. So we'll go to Show All to make sure we can see all of them in one area. Now we can see all 50 possible questions. From here, we can display full text to read the entire question. We can click the little box to see the answers, and we can pick which 5 questions we want to provide to all of our students at the end of the test. And there we have it, our 20-question final exam, consisting of 1 essay question from Chapter 11, 4 multiple choice from Chapter 11, 1 essay from Chapter 12, 4 multiple choice from Chapter 12, 1 essay from Chapter 13, 4 multiple choice from Chapter 13, and then 5 specific questions that all students will get. As you probably noticed, the key difference highlighted here between question sets like these and random blocks like these is that question sets allow more control over the questions that you'll be using for your subsets. Now, in addition to pools, we also mentioned that if you have created tests in your Blackboard course previously, you can use these as well to pull questions from, the same way you use pools. Go to Reuse Question, and then pick your format, question set, random block, or find questions. From here, under Pools, go to Tests, and select a test. From here, we can pick questions that we want to use and reuse questions that we've already created. This is very helpful because if you manually created questions or if you uploaded them from a Word document, then you can reuse them in future tests just by using Find Questions. And they're added to the bottom. Now, we mentioned this briefly before, but you can reorder the questions as they appear. For example, all the questions in this random block will appear after the questions in this random block. So you'll see Chapter 12 questions before you see Chapter 13 questions. If you want to change that ordering, you can drag and drop the random blocks. Or you can use keyboard accessible reordering at the top right. Keyboard accessible reordering allows you to click on an individual question and move it up or down in context. Once you click Submit, the questions will be reordered as you desired. In Test Options, we'll be able to randomize questions, but for now, this is the order that the questions will appear into the students. One final note on this is that you can build your test by using a combination of adding individual questions and reusing questions like find questions, question set, and random block. The test canvas displays the order these various methods will be asked of students. This is a very robust system, which is why we've spent a lot of time in this video to discuss the various possibilities. If you have a scenario in mind that you would like to try, but are not sure how to implement it with the available options, please let us know, and we'll be happy to guide you through it using these tools. Our next video will focus on how to set points per question and overall, and how to designate extra credit questions.